All right, good afternoon, everyone. It is March 20th, 2025. Welcome to Scouching Live. I, of course, am your host, Will. I am super excited about today. We're going to have a lot of fun. I've brought on a very good friend of mine and an actual hockey team employee in Frölunda Hockey Club Scout extraordinaire, Mikael Holm. Mikael, welcome. It's been a long time. I think you were on this show for a World Junior show a while ago, but welcome back. How have you been? What's the weather like over in Sweden? How are you? What's going on, man?
Yeah, it's been a while. It was, as you said, it was for the World Junior 2024, 23, 24, I think.
Yeah.
And yeah, the weather in Sweden is great, actually. It's 11 degrees. It's like 11 degrees Celsius. It's sunny and beautiful. And I've been playing golf for like a month. So
you're
or at
golfing.
driving range at least.
Oh,
so
okay. In the 11 degree heat, you're out golfing, eh? All right, I get it. Fair enough.
That's pretty warm.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose. I mean, it's the same here. It's the first day of spring. It was 20 degrees here the other day, which was pretty wild. But anyway, welcome to the show. We're gonna have some fun. So what we're gonna do today is we're gonna talk a little bit about your experience and how things have been going for you working in the SHL on the more junior side of things, but also just some 2025 guys in general and sort of your views on those guys, and a little bit about like the machinations of how hockey works over in Sweden. So I'll kind of turn it over to you. So like you've been working with Frölunda for, this is your first season there? Like yeah, okay. So you've been here a season. Right off the bat, like what's something that you kind of have learned coming in that you didn't really expect, or that you maybe had a misconception about now that you're on a team side of things that kind of has come up in the last, whatever it is, 8 months?
I think I always knew like watching players live in person was very important, but like I think just traveling around and watching players from all different age groups, from 13-year-olds to to pro players. So that's been like watching them live and comparing to video and what they look like on video and what it would look like live, I think have really like heightened my what I think is how important I think watching live is.
Mhm.
I think that was also one thing that they really pointed to, that is very important to them at Frölunda, to be in the barn or in the arenas, depending on what you're watching. So I think the watching live, I kind of underrated, I think, maybe before I became a scout for Frölunda. But yeah, otherwise it's just like minor things when watching players, like some skating quirks and stuff that they put me on to that I watch quite a bit more than I did before. And yeah, it's been a lot of things that I'm trying to figure out, like what is it that I really changed. But like I haven't changed too much in my views, but I think there's just things that I put more importance to now.
So in your experience, I guess, you obviously have a much more direct understanding. Like I think there's a lot of talk over here in North America, or maybe not enough talk about hockey in Europe and how the system there is a little bit different, or how it scales relative to sort of the Canadian and American junior and college system and everything. And now you're kind of on that side of things. And I mean, Frölunda is kind of like many other teams in Sweden. Like there's an entire program from like youth up to the senior team, right? So in a nutshell, like how does that system kind of break down? Like you're obviously interested or responsible for recruiting from sort of the really young age groups. Obviously you can't get into details about like specifics about that age group, but in terms of like, that process of that the sort of culture that's there, like could you outline what that process is like when you're out there looking at 13, 14, 15-year-old players and trying to think, okay, are these guys going to fit with our team or whatever? Like obviously without specifics of like what the team is looking for, how does that system sort of work, and what do you think are the benefits that you've seen from that sort of process to this point?
Well, it's a very different system in that we don't have like we have our junior series, of course, in J18 and J20, but what we do in Sweden is we have what we call hockey gymnasia or gymnasia, which is like the last 3 years of high school for you guys. It's basically the equivalent. For us, it's from when you're 16, then 16, 17, 18, you go in gymnasiet. And from that point, we have a recruitment basically for gymnasiet, and we have our own, we have our like a school that we work with that we can get our players into, and then you have the players being able to have like a hockey sort of program in school, so they can come to us in the mornings and practice and work out in the mornings before they go to school, or like during school hours, and they have a little bit more of a different schedule, so they can still be like in our academy, as we call it, and while also going to school full time, so they get an education and finish school, which is also very important for these young players. So we have basically what I've been doing is scouting players to recruit for HG, that's we call it. This is short for HG. So I'll probably use that for high school,
right?
Or a high school hockey team, maybe it's easier. So that's basically what I've been doing in the lower ages or younger age group, and so yeah, we mostly, as Frölunda is a Gothenburg team. We're from Gothenburg. Gothenburg is the second largest city in Sweden. It's very important for us to have players from our area. So Gothenburg players are priority. This makes up most of our junior teams are players from Gothenburg and the Gothenburg area. So that's the most important thing. And then if we can, and if we find someone from other regions in Sweden, we can bring them into our hockey high school when the year they turn 16. We can sign them a year before, but they're coming to us the year they turn 16 and after summer. So in August, the year they turn 16, so they start high school basically then.
So is that kind of like, that's kind of the pathway, but are there teams for like younger age groups than that sort of you feed into that? So like, is that sort of like bringing in kids who may play with other programs in the area, and you kind of go to them and say, hey, we want to put you in, hours and give you that sort of educational experience? Like, or does it generally all sort of start at that? Are you watching these 13, 14-year-olds sort of setting the foundation to say, okay, here's where we're going to kind of focus when they're 15 or 16, right? And then try to recruit them there. Because if I'm not mistaken, like it goes younger than that at Frölunda,
yeah.
But obviously, so is it just like it's separate from the actual hockey focused education then, and then they kind of get fed into it at that point?
Like, yeah, we have younger teams, but when they turn to U16 age, that's when they start to get a little bit more serious from our side. We have practice every day and stuff like that, more, and a lot of more games against other better teams. When they're younger, it's more local and play against teams that basically is our foundation, which is the teams in the smaller teams in Gothenburg, like Hovås, Kungälv, Kungsbacka, all of those like teams that no one probably in this or watching this
I don't know.
recognize. No, but they are the teams that like make up the foundation for us, where they play from a young age, where they start when they're 5 or whatever the players start, what age they start playing hockey. They play in these teams, and then when they get up to a certain age, then they move to us for their education to become a pro hockey player, which is always the goal of every player. Like, we want to get as many pro hockey players that we can get, basically. So that's what we're trying to, but we gotta like give credit to all the youth teams that are basically propping up us. And the same goes for like Djurgården in Stockholm. There's an insane amount of teams in Stockholm.
Right.
There's a lot of teams in Gothenburg, but there's even more in Stockholm. There's like the double in Stockholm, and there's so many different teams there. The prop up teams all over Sweden where they're bringing players from Stockholm. So yeah, it's that way. that's how it is in every region, basically. Like you have your own region where you build the foundation of the team, and then you can maybe pick and choose if you're able to recruit players from other places around the country.
Right. So I guess a question I'm curious about after this, because you're talking like, yeah, it's the thing that fascinates me is that you mentioned like it's about training future professional players, right? Like you want guys who grow up to be, like that's the idea. Whether they play for Frölunda's senior team or they sign somewhere else and play at a lower division or whatever, like the goal is to have them play professional hockey. And I feel like here, we have that kind of thing, but it's more like out of control. Like is it because it feels like here around like 12, 13, 14, that's when you start seeing things like getting really, really serious with players. And, if you're not playing, the cultural thing here is if you're not playing AAA hockey at, 13, then your path is way more difficult. And there's people bouncing from team to team to team. Is it different over there? Like if you're say, you're in Stockholm basically, so you have a lot more familiarity with like your garden and all those younger players, and and all those players. We'll get to those guys in a bit, but is it just a different cultural way of looking at the sport and like training these athletes and these kids to like be on a certain pathway that is more not so much about them as NHL players or something, but really just about their growth. Like it seems like it's more about their growth than it is about really, really lofty expectations that hold like these 13-year-olds to a pretty high standard. Like you said, it kind of becomes more serious around 16. So is that kind of like what's the kind of approach? Because I am curious about developmental strategy, and so with that middle school 12 to 14-year-old people, what kind of would be the sort of approach with them to sort of guide them into that more professional stream without having it be entirely focused on like, well, you got to do this and this and this to get to that professional side of the game?
Yeah, I mean, we still have like young players that are like in that age, like 12, 13, 14, that are uh, playing for, like, there are local teams in every area that are, um, I don't know, like trying to be the pathway to the pro teams, like trying to be like the team where you develop as a young player and then you move on to an SHL team or a Hockey Allsvenskan team. And when it's time for, as I said, like the high school teams. So we do have that, and we do also have like there's a lot of individual individual coaches and stuff that are like these young players are going to. But I think what Swedish hockey is trying to do always had like, I think they always want to have a more of a depth, more like more people play as long as possible just to play something. I think we have that in all sports, where we try to like get players to have fun, even if they don't want to turn pro or not good enough to turn pro or whatever. Like trying to just have them play for as long as possible. I think that's why a part of the reason why we're not going that low in ages with the pro teams, because
Right.
we're trying to just have them, like, trying to make hockey as fun for as many people as possible for a longer time. So it's not just like until you're 10 and then it's all full focus on like becoming a pro, trying to become a pro. Like it should be still fun up until a certain age. And we have also like, I don't know how it is in Canada or US, but we have like smaller rinks or like they play in a different size. Like I don't think they play full sheet of ice until they're 12 or 13.
Mm-hmm.
And like even U15 hockey is only two periods of 20 minutes. So it's not
Right.
3 periods of 20 minutes until you're playing U16 hockey. So I think it's a bit different there. I'm not sure how it looks like, but I've seen clips of young players in Canada where they play full sheet of ice and they're like 9. So
Right.
So yeah, I don't know.
It's a bit of I guess it depends on who you ask and how much people care, but it's a bit of a hot button topic over here. Like it's for some reason a bit controversial. It's the same thing with like, when do you let kids hit each other and blah blah blah. Like there's this everything is very argumentative. And so I think with the full, I know for a fact that it is becoming more common here that you don't play full sheet of ice for a really long time. When I grew up in the 90s, you played full sheet all the time and I hated it, right? Like the logic is obvious, right? So
Yeah,
I'm glad.
you can't be 9 or 10 and play a full sheet of ice. Like
It's
you're gonna,
impossible,
yeah. Like
you know.
I'm at a lot of hockey Allsvenskan games too for Frölunda scouting,
Right.
and in Stockholm. And every first period break, there's a youth team playing hockey, like for 3 minutes or something, just to like show up in front of the crowd,
Sure.
like a local team. And it's like they're exhausted after
Yeah.
like the 9-year-olds playing full sheet of ice, and there's like 20 players on the ice, and everyone's just like completely like
Yeah.
done when they play
Yeah.
3 minutes.
I mean, the thing is here, like I think part of the problem in Canada, and I think we kind of been dancing around it and talking a little bit around it, but I think the problem here is that there isn't very much leadership and centralization of how to, how to set that foundation, right? Like you could play in I think that the closest thing, whoa, I'm almost slipped out of my chair. I think the closest thing to what you're sort of talking about is kind of what they're trying to do out in the CSSHL out west. So like Alberta, British Columbia, there's a lot of these schools that have now been built, these like private educational institutions where hockey is the primary focus, and there is a lot more of that happening. And like there's a private school near Toronto that St. Andrews that obviously has had some guys drafted out of, and they're kind of similar to that, but they are still just a school, right? So it's similar but different, but again, it's very sort of decentralized. And my impression is that what you guys are doing at Frölunda is not uncommon, and not necessarily sort of like a breakthrough sort of progressive way of doing things. It's just sort of how it's done. And here it's very fragmented, right? Like I think kids could, I think that might be part of the reason why kids jump from one team to another team and switch things around, because they're going, this isn't working for me, or this doesn't work, for whatever reason. Or the parents here are very influential, and they can have a lot of control over, or if they think they have a lot of control over what gets done and how and all of these things. And I think that's where a lot of that controversy comes from. But I mean, it seems like the way you guys do it, right? Like there's a beautiful simplicity to it. You know what I mean? And so I don't think that's abnormal in Sweden. Like you can correct me if I'm wrong, but most, I would think, SHL and maybe Hockey Allsvenskan teams with their junior programs kind of have a similar system wherever they might be.
Yeah. Almost. I think it's like at least I would say 90% of the Hockey Allsvenskan SHL teams have what we have, like a high school program where they bring in people to go to high school, but also play for their J18 or J20 teams. But like we're in no means perfect either. Like in Sweden, we all have the same. We have all have the same issues with like parents and all that stuff. Like trying to be professional much earlier than you should, or
Right.
you should. Like I don't want to sound like I know best, because I don't. I'm just a scout. Like I
Right.
don't know. I don't know like what's best for like the future of Swedish hockey, but I think there's a little bit more calmness, a little
Right.
less pro. Like I think it's just like having junior teams having a draft in Canada, like the OHL or QMJHL and
Mhm.
WHL drafts. I think that hurries up like a pro chase, like a chase for something professional much earlier
Mm.
than what we have, where we have a little bit more calmness to it. But there's also a chase for like, I get contacted by players who wants to come early here to Frölunda and stuff like that as well. Like I get emails quite a bit about that. So I think it's all just, we're trying to make things calmer in Sweden,
Yeah.
but I don't know if we're succeeding. But
Right.
I think we have a good system because of how much, like look at how many NHL players we have. We have like 100 NHL players each season, and I think that's very much thanks to the system that we have in place, then it can always get better, and we always try to improve it. But I think for a country of 10 million, having as many players as we do that are pro in hockey and pro playing in the NHL, Liga, SHL, like playing in Switzerland and all, Germany as well.
Right.
We have so many players out there, and I think that's a credit to our system in a lot of ways.
Yeah. So let's slowly start segueing into what everyone's probably here, to talk about. But you are
not the Swedish system.
I love it. I am all about it. I love this stuff. I'm a dork, right? Like, I love systems, right? But people probably want to care more about the 2025 draft. But you are I'm not there yet. You're a Stockholm guy ish. You're a Djurgården guy. That's your ride or die as a fan. You're at a lot of the games, right? I mean, obviously,
yeah, I'm there a lot.
You're there a lot.
Frölunda, seeing their
you're
games
a lot. You've seen these guys a million times, but I mean, you have a much more firm understanding of obviously the system that goes on over there. So Djurgården is one of the teams in competition to be promoted back to SHL. They haven't been there in a little while, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
What are, like, when a team gets promoted or relegated or whatever, I'm always curious about the differences structurally, and like what if there's a financial difference between being an SHL program and a Hockey Allsvenskan program. Like, what is it that shifts in whichever direction when that actually happens, right? Because obviously different leagues, different levels of attention, different whatever. But I mean, I don't know. I watch a lot of Hockey Allsvenskan too, and those arenas are generally packed and rocking and having a great time. So it's not like it's, Peterborough in October, when they're at the bottom of the league and no one's at the games, right? So what are the things that kind of shift from league to league that might not get talked about or reported as much, that, because we don't really have that kind of a system like at all here?
Yeah, so the biggest difference is the TV money that you get from this decentralized TV money. You get, I think, I'm not completely sure, I don't want to say wrong, but I think you get 50 million Swedish crowns if you're in the SHL from the TV money. I think you get 5 million if you're in Hockey Allsvenskan.
So that's I think, if I'm doing the math correctly, that's maybe 5 million Canadian dollars ish, something like that. And like,
5 million US, I think, for sort of around for SHL, and 500,000 US for Hockey Allsvenskan. Sort of.
Swedish crowns.
Yeah.
But I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah, so it's a massive difference. So if you're relegated, usually before, when you were relegated, you got a sum when you were relegated, like some money, so you could be, so the blow wouldn't be too hard when you got relegated. That they have removed that now. So to make it more fair to the competition, because like the teams relegated from the SHL used to have like double the budget basically of compared to other teams, the top teams in Hockey Allsvenskan. So now they are a little bit more evened out. So yeah, that's the big difference. TV money, like Hockey Allsvenskan teams struggle a lot. A lot of teams struggle because they just can't afford the traveling, like all over Sweden. Like you have teams in, what is the most southern team in Hockey Allsvenskan right now? Is it maybe or no, Kalmar, I think. Like Kalmar to Björklöven is like 1,000 something kilometers, so like almost 2,000, I think. So it's a lot of no, it's like 1,500 kilometers, let's say. It's a long trip.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah. So it's far between the teams, and you have to travel all that, and you can't really, like, they can't afford flying all the time, so there's a lot of bus trips and stuff like that as well. While in the SHL, you can maybe afford flying from Malmö to Luleå, which is very far, or whatever. So I think that's the big difference. The TV money makes it a lot of different, big difference for the teams when they try to that's why this year in Hockeyallsvenskan is a little bit different, because Oskarshamn was the team that got relegated from SHL, and they are not famous for being like one of the richer teams in the SHL or the bigger teams. So they every team in Hockeyallsvenskan this year have really rallied to like push a lot of money into the teams to be promoted, because this is the year they feel like they have the opportunity to be promoted. Now in the relegation final, or whatever you want to call it, between Modo and HV71, which are two big teams. HV71 is probably the team, I think I've heard that they are the team that spend the most money on players in the entire SHL. So I think if they get relegated, the teams know in Hockeyallsvenskan that they can't compete with them. So it's tough. The disparity between teams that get relegated and promoted are usually pretty big. So that's a big thing. Makes it different.
And I'm assuming if you jump down one more division, it's even more insane. Like going from Hockeyettan to Hockeyallsvenskan is probably like, because I don't even know how many teams are in the third division in Sweden, but it feels like a zillion. And so working your way into Hockeyallsvenskan from there feels, I mean, I guess it's similar to like gaining a spot in the football league in like League 2 or something in English football. There are so many teams in the national leagues that like getting into that funnel is a huge difference. Like, I don't know how much you can sort of shine on that, but like that's also very interesting to me, because there are so many teams all over the place competing for that one spot. I think that completely revolutionizes, even if it's temporary, like revolutionizes their organization.
Yeah, it's crazy. I think it should be more than one spot up for grabs. But as you say, Hockeyettan is massive, and even they didn't have a full league, I think, this year, because teams had to pull up because they couldn't afford to play in Hockeyettan, because Division 2 in Sweden, which is the fourth tier of hockey in Sweden, they are much more local. That's much more localized. So it's more local teams playing each other. Local-ish, I would say, at least. Even Hockeyettan is kind of local, but it depends on which division you're put in, because the northern Hockeyettan division is pretty far from local. That's a lot of travel for those teams.
Yeah, there are some teams that are way out there.
Yeah.
It's I don't know. It fascinates me, like the whole club system and the club approach to things like that, and having so many organizations out there that, you know, if things go a certain way and you're a Division 1 team, and let's say, you know, Peter Forsberg comes along and he's like, yeah, I've got $100 million in the bank. Like, why not? You know, like that team could work their way up to being one of the top teams in the country. And that's it. It's really just like, you put better players on the team and you'll find your way up. And we just don't have that here, which I love it. So yeah, I'm a big fan of it. So it's always been interesting to me, like the actual the actual things that change behind those promotions and relegations. So we've been doing this for half an hour. I think it's about time. Let's do this 2025 draft. I think you and I are in agreement that the Swedish group this year is very undervalued, I think. And I think that with the under 18s coming up, and how many times this team internationally has done well this season, even in just those friendly matches and stuff, there's a lot going on. And it starts at home for you, really, where you've got two guys, Victor Eklund and Anton Fröndell, basically full-time Hockeyallsvenskan players, both very important players on the team now. Both, you know, similar players, but also not so similar in a lot of ways. Like they're you know, cut from a similar cloth, I suppose, but they're both in competition, trying to earn their team a promotion. So I guess we can start with Fröndell, because I know you and I talk about him a lot, and I know that you're a really big fan of his, and he may be the one that goes first out of all of these guys coming from Sweden. So you've probably been watching Fröndell since he was like 8 years old. You know, that's just how it is. So
15 at least.
Yeah. So what do you see when you look at Fröndell, and what do you see for, let's say I'm an NHL team fan and my team just drafted him? Like, what are you getting, and what do you think he could be in a few years? Because he has fought some injuries over the last little while.
I think he's an elite player at finding space in the offensive zone to get a shot off or find like a loose puck, or like in the offensive zone just getting open is his MO. Like that's his best quality to me. Like he finds space, even if it's small or if it's big or whatever. He finds space for a shot or whatever, and I think that's his biggest quality. He has a great shot. He is physical. He's heavy. You and me talked a little bit before we started here. He's listed at 198 pounds now, which is
a big boy.
Is bigger than I thought. But yeah, he's a big boy, and he is strong. Like he throws hits. He's physical. I think when you look at him as he plays as a winger in Hockeyallsvenskan. He has a little bit restricted role is wrong, but he has a certain role to play on his line, with Victor Eklund being like the main play driver, carrying the puck, doing a lot of stuff, doing a lot of heavy lifting, while Fröndell is just working to get open, find space in the offensive zone, and score. Like that's his main part, like score points, score goals. That's what he does, and that's what his role is basically in that line as well. I think when you look at him as a center in U18 hockey, or when he played J20, I think you can see that there's a defensive qualities to him that I can see that he can that's why I think he translates as a center into the NHL. I think he's not going to be the play driver on your line if you draft him, but I think if you surround him with, I think I wrote this to you sometime when we talked about him, that I see him as a little bit of like a Mark Scheifele, where you put him with like players that are more heavy play drivers, like Scheifele plays with Cal Connor or Nikolai Ehlers a lot. Those are a little bit more like heavy on the puck, like speedy wingers, and Scheifele finds space and tried and scores a lot of goals. Like he has a lot of goals this year, I think.
Right.
So, and I think he's a 40 goal scorer one season or something like that. And I think that's a little bit more what Fröndell is going to be. You put him with wingers that are like Victor Eklund,
right?
Like find a Victor Eklund and put him on the wing, basically. So yeah, I think that's what he is. I think he's a very talented player. I don't think he's the most talented player, because I like Eklund more, just like you do. But I like both of them in the top 10. I like Fröndell I probably have a little bit higher regard, or I see a little bit higher upside than you do potentially, but I think he can be a center in the NHL. If he's not, and you put him on the wing, that's fine too. He's going to be a top 6 player. That's what I think.
Yeah, I think I'm with you largely. Like, I think if we went through how we disagree, I think we'd be really splitting hairs on that.
Yeah.
Really, really splitting hairs. Like, I don't know. Like, maybe if I was a little more stubborn and we were sitting at a draft table together, we'd probably rip each other's hair out if we were at like 5th overall. But on that note, you brought up Victor Eklund, and I've been a huge fan of him since the moment I laid eyes on him last season. And you said you kind of prefer him a little bit to Fröndell, and that he's more of this like play driver, this sort of get up the ice type player. What is it that you see with Eklund that might put him a little bit ahead of where you see Fröndell? Because I mean, I agree with you, and I feel like they might go the opposite way. Like in the NHL draft, like I feel like Fröndell might be the guy that goes first at this rate, but I don't know, maybe not. It's still early. But yeah, so relative to a guy like Fröndell, what is it that you see in an Eklund that puts him a little bit ahead of you, and maybe, you know, where he might go from here?
I think with Eklund, he has that elite skating ability that very few players, I think, have at his age. Like, I don't want to it's always wrong to compare players with like a McDavid or a McKinnon, but he has the thing that they have with like that acceleration they have, like the boost of speed they get very quickly, and like can get in between defenders because they are so fast. I think Eklund has some of that, which is why I have him very high, because he can like just blast off
Right.
with his speed and his pace, and he just gets in between defenders. He has good stick handling. He's insane along the boards. Like, he's one of the best board players I've seen in the draft context. Like, just at that age, playing against men, just constantly getting out from the boards with the puck. At his size too, like, he's 5'11", 165 pounds or something. Like, he does not lose many battles along the boards, and he is strong. And then he's just a pure hockey player. He blocks shots, works his ass off. He hits. He just does everything he can to win a game. And I think that his compete level and the skating ability, and he has a really good shot too. Like, I think also during the season he's really improved his playmaking, where he earlier in the season and the years before, I think he just skated up the ice. When he got in the offensive zone, he tried to look for a shot opportunity, the first thing he did. While now he takes maybe the puck a little bit longer, further along the boards, or like deeper down in the zone when he can enter with the control of the puck, and try to find someone coming from behind, or trying to find a pass, being able to make in the neutral zone, like finding a guy rushing towards the offense, so basically, or finding an open space. I think he's gotten much better at that during the season. So yeah, I think he's just I'm not going to say a complete player, but
Right.
he's not, but he has a lot of abilities you can build off of.
How do you think he compares to his brother? Like, I get that question a lot, and I think I have a decent understanding of what that might be, but in your opinion, because, William wasn't that long ago, we were talking about him as a draft eligible. What do you think are the differences between those two and how they might complement each other? There is also a non-zero chance that they end up on the same NHL team, which I'm sure San Jose Sharks fans would enjoy. But what is your sort of thought about how those two compare? Because the other guy's starting to figure it out in the NHL, and it's been a few years. But yeah, how do you think those two line up?
I think Victor is much higher pace player. Well, I think William is great, just like twisting, turning with the puck, finding a passing option in front of the net, finding small spaces of areas to work in. I think he's a little bit better under pressure. Now, I said Victor's great along the boards, but I think William is better at getting loose from the boards. Like, he can get the puck out of a tough situation or heavy pressure along the boards, and then get out and find more open space, while Victor more goes along the boards and not finding the space to like get a pass off or being. So I think William's a little bit more creative as well. I think Victor's a little bit straight line player. But yeah, they're all both very talented. I was for a very long while I thought I had William ahead of Victor, but now I'm not so sure anymore.
Right.
It's Victor is really, really, really coming to his own this season, and he even almost played his best hockey when he didn't score as much. Now, later during the season, he's had his best hockey when he scored. Him and Frölunda has been scoring at a insane rate in the last season. Yeah, the last month they've been crazy. Like, I think Frölunda had like 19 points in 11 games, and Eklund had 15 in 13 or something. So you don't see draft eligible players have that in pro hockey a lot.
Yeah, and it's not an easy league either, right? Like, you might think, oh, second division in Sweden, oh, blah blah blah, but no, it's not. It's tough hockey. Like, and those teams are, and especially if you're a team at the top of the table and you think there's a chance you're going to be in the SHL, like, they want that. You want that. That's a thing that, like, especially a team like your Garden, where they're in Stockholm, like, they're a huge program with a huge arena, and like, they've got this huge sort of spotlight. And so for those two guys to show up and be arguably among their best players, like, you would think, is pretty amazing. And so to see them, like, do you think, assuming they don't come to the NHL next year or something, and let's say hypothetically that they get themselves a promotion in the SHL from here, do you think they could be like highly impactful SHL players next year, or do you think it's more of a slow burn because of just how good that league is, that it might take a little bit of time for them to sort of hit their stride at that level?
I think Victor will really thrive in the SHL because the pace of play there is much higher, and I think it's just like a little bit less setup play in the offensive or in defensive zone. So I think he will thrive with just like rush hockey. Like on the rush, he will do really, really well. I don't want to say they're going to score the same amount of points,
Of
but like
course, yeah.
the feeling right now is that they will. I don't think their scoring is very league dependent, I think, or like quality of opposition dependent. I think they score regardless, maybe not as much, but like I think they will be highly impactful players, probably top 6 players for Djurgården if they get promoted. They both have signed contracts for the next year, regardless of what league Djurgården plays in.
Okay.
But that can change if the NHL teams have priority when they draft players in the first round and sign contracts with them. So if they both Eklund and Frölunda will get drafted in the first round,
Right.
I'm pretty sure of.
Yeah, I think so.
So the NHL team ultimately have the decision to, like, they can play them in the AHL if they don't feel like they should be in Hockeyallsvenskan, for example, if Djurgården don't get promoted.
Got it. Yeah. Okay. So that's a good start on those two guys. I mean, the thing that's tough to go from here is with the Swedish group. I think from here it just opens wide open. Like I think there are a lot of guys in that group beyond those top 2 that, depending on who you ask or what day of the week, like you could think differently about all kinds of them or who you'd rather have. I mean, I think in the SHL this year there have been quite a few players who at 17 or 18 years old have made their way onto the rosters and been very impactful at that level, which is something that Eklund and Frölunda don't even have the chance of doing, right? So, I mean, I'll leave it to you. Like, where do you kind of want to go from here with these guys, and where do you see in the Swedish class this year? Like, who are maybe the next handful of players that you might really want to throw out there? Because I'm sure there are lots of people who say, like, maybe an Eddie Genborg, a Jakub Wozniak, a Milton Yastrin. But to me, I think that group is larger. So I'm curious of what you might put out there.
Yeah, I think from what I've seen, I saw Milton Yastrin in person a couple of weeks ago at a J20 game. I think he's next one up. I've got to really check. I mean, it's him or maybe Eric Nilsson. They're pretty similar to me. I really like Gustav Hillström, what he's done in the J20 and in the CHL. I think his smarts are like off the charts. He's a really, really smart hockey player. I know you like Sverchik a lot. I like him too. I think I don't think he's on the same level as like a Justrin or Nilsson, but I think he's just behind them. I think there's a little bit more offensive upside, I think, in like a Justrin or a Nilsson, where I think they create a little bit more scoring chances and stuff like that. But like there's a big group there where you can, if you like them a lot, you can take them at 15, or they can go down to like 35. But there's, I don't know, 8 players you can put in that group or something. Like there's defensemen, like I like Malte Vass. I think he's a really solid player. I don't think he's a first rounder, but like somewhere around early second round, I wouldn't have a problem if someone selected him there. I watched Carl Anborn have a really good SHL game recently against Linköping for HV71, which was awesome.
I watched that game this morning.
yeah, and
he was pretty good.
It was more. I think he fits much better in the SHL than J20, where J20 gets a little bit more leash, and in SHL he needs to process things quicker, and I think that helps him a lot with his play from down deep. But yeah, there's a lot of players in that group where you can. But I think Milton Yastrin is probably the next one up.
Yeah, I mean, it is pretty wild. Like every year, it kind of I think I kind of forget just how fast the SHL is. Like every year, I seem to kind of forget how quick the game goes by at that level and how hard it can be to score because it's just so fast. Like everything, like you just don't really get the opportunity to get into the middle of the ice as much. And it's just if you want to generate offense, it's almost like perimeter first, and then you get inside off the puck or something like that. Like it's so fast and it's so hard to to generate anything in that league from my experience. And so to see guys like you said with a Carl Onborn, who, I mean, I don't think there's like a huge upside player there, but to see him in the SHL is very interesting, and comparing him to his J20 version of himself. Because I agree, I think there are players who I think, it's almost like a very welcome challenge for them, right? Where like we can like with regards to say Sverchek, right? Like he's a guy who in the junior level I watched and I went, yeah, like this guy is insanely good forechecker, really, really good 200-foot guy who is physical and quick stick checker and quick everything. But he tries a lot in J20 where I kind of go, yeah, you got to simplify things a little bit here. Like you could make an easier play that doesn't cause a turnover or something like that. And then he goes to the SHL, and I think you kind of learn very quickly that you can't really do that kind of thing and not pay for it more in the SHL. Yeah. And so the off puck stuff and the 200-foot impact stuff is definitely still there. I see similarities, not literal in terms of style of play and positives and negatives, but like Eddie Genborg is another one where I think in J20 you see a guy who, he's very big, his game is pretty simple, but it's effective. He scores a ton, goes to the net, is big, does all the things you kind of need him to do, throws his body around, whatever. But in the SHL, it's like when the stick's on his when the puck's on his stick, his handling of the puck is not amazing, and he just kind of doesn't really generate a whole lot of separation speed. So it's a test for him to sort of overcome that at that level and figure out what works in the SHL. So that's what kind of interests me about watching these guys at that level, because I mean, I don't know when a North American player will face a challenge of that caliber when you have guys who are 17 years old doing it over in Sweden already. So when you look at guys that you've seen maybe break into the SHL this year, like where is that something, if you were an NHL scout, that you would particularly value as something very, very desirable? And is there anyone that you've seen that kind of checks that box based on what you've seen once they got out of the junior league and into top division? Because we've talked about Onbarn, but I'm wondering if there's any others that you think stick out in that way.
Yeah, I think it is important, I think, to a certain degree. Depends on how much you get to play in the SHL too. Like if you'd have one game with 12 minutes or whatever, like I don't want to put too much value in that. But it's also, like you said with Onborn, we talked about him, but like that game was vastly different to me, or not vastly, but much different to me than his play in J20s, where I go, okay, but I value this higher, that this game over like a 10-game sample in J20, because this is what pace will look like in the future for him if he goes to the NHL, for example. So I think it's a big value to see these players at an SHL level, just because, as you said, the pace of play have become much, much higher, especially the more recent years, like after the pandemic. I think it's been a big change towards higher pace hockey. I don't want to say it's the NHL without the physicality, but it's kind of that.
Yeah,
a little towards that.
Yeah,
like there's not a lot of physicality in the SHL, and I get a little bit frustrated when I watch SHL sometimes, because sometimes it's very, very I don't want to say soft, but sometimes it's just like finish your checks. I feel like, but yeah, the players that have gone to the SHL and done well, I think. I mean, Leo Sundqvist is a small player, but I think seeing him in the SHL and seeing the speed he has in the SHL and seeing more of his like straight, like easier play compared to J20, I think he really impressed me a lot. And I see it's easy to say when you have a smaller player and that skates really well and is fast, or he's fast, I would say. It has some quirks with his skating where you can go, where you can I could see someone disqualify him for it, because some are very nitpicky with that. But I really like his speed. He has a lot of pace, and he kind of reminds me of like Victor Arvidsson at the same age. Like there's you can draw similarities, like even like looking at point total and stuff like that. They score a little bit similar, have a similar amount of SHL games. I think Sundqvist has played a little bit more in the SHL than Victor Arvidsson did in his original draft year. Arvidsson was like a D+2 pick, I think.
I was just going to look that up because he was a re-entry. Yeah,
I think he was drafted in 20.
He was drafted
D+3,
yeah.
And it took a lot of years before before NHL teams recognized his game, but he was good really, really young too. Like I remember World Juniors and stuff like that, where Arvidsson was playing great comparatively to others. But yeah, I like Elias Sundqvist there because I think his game in the J20 is good. It's likable, but I think seeing him in the SHL and seeing him being really fast compared to a lot of players there and really being able to play in that sort of pace is it's very positive, and I really like my views of him.
Yeah, I mean those three guys there have been a ton of fun to watch in the SHL, and I did kind of want to touch a little bit more on before we move on to others, like Gustav Hillström, who has just grown on me and grown on me and grown on me all year. And then once I saw him in the SHL, I look at him and I go, I'm starting to think that I'm a little bit off my rocker with where I would consider drafting him in the NHL, but like he might be one of the best combinations of like smarts and skating ability in the class. Like I don't know, like I know you and I have been watching him for like a year, but you're like, how do you value just how smart a guy like that is, especially off the puck, and where he could go from here? Because I'm really curious about him from a Swedish perspective, because I've loved him, and I think that the smarts that he has, like if we're living in a world where NHL scouts value guys who can play the game intelligently up the middle of the ice and cover ice really, really well and do all that, I think he checks every box. So I'm curious of what your view on him is, and then we can maybe move on to some other guys.
I think he is a first rounder to me. I think he should be like this. The smarts, as I said earlier, like it's off the charts. He's incredibly smart, and I think smart is a very loose thing to talk about because there's so many things going into what a smart hockey player is. But like when you watch Gustav Hillström, you're like, that's a smart hockey player. And
it's like I don't know why exactly. But you watch him and you're like, yes.
But as you said, he covers ice really well. He reads play, like he moves off puck really well, like finding space in the neutral zone, being very important to me to be like an option for your defenseman when you're in the neutral zone or like in transition, and trying to be like, he always trying to find that space, and I think he finds the space really well. As you said, his skating is really good. Like he has good size to him. He's like 6'2" something. I think he's going to be a response. I saw a question there that were like the most natural center in the Swedish draft class, and I think he is certainly the one for me. I think that's he's going to be a center regardless. I think he's going to be a center, like next level, like
not a winger. There's no
you don't want him on a wing.
No, he's either a center or he's nothing.
Exactly.
He's retired. Like it's crazy. Like he's great. So if there's anyone if there's anyone out there wondering who a Swedish player nobody talks about is worth watching, it's probably Gustav Hillström, I would say. Just if you really want to sort of have a good understanding of the game. I mean, maybe a couple other guys might be a little more fun to watch, but in terms of just a really good player, he's been the one that I think has stuck out the most to me, especially, like I think guys like Yastrin as a center are more impressive, so to speak. But in terms of in terms of skill level, but in terms of like just all around playing hockey, I think I think that Hillström is a very, very interesting player. So like I
Sorry.
guess. Oh no, it's okay.
My screen just went black. So
nice. Though that's those rolling communist blackouts in Sweden. The government taking away your electricity. You're
exactly.
I do kind of want to circle back on Djurgården a little bit, because there's two guys on the Djurgården junior team who are also draft eligibles this year that probably get picked relatively early this year in Eric Nilsson and Theo Stakselius.
Yeah.
Stockselius obviously extremely productive this year. Nilsson not as much, but I think you and I would both agree that Nilsson's probably the better player right now.
Yeah.
So with Nilsson, like what I obviously have talked about him ad nauseum this season, but now we have someone who's probably seen him more than I have. What do you think a team is getting with him, and where do you think that kind of slots him in the draft right now? Because I just watched him yesterday, so I'll let you take it away, and then I'll tell you why you're wrong.
Yeah. I mean, I think like if you look at Bob's list, I think he's probably on the border of the first and second round player. I think he's a second or first round player
Yeah,
in like in terms of talent. I think like if you just turn on you go to J20 team, you're gonna have a moment where you go like, oh, who is that? This guy with cage in number 3, and then you're like, oh yeah, that's Eric Nilsson, of course.
Yep.
Like every time if you watch someone on the other team and you're like, holy crap, who is that? And then you're like, oh, it's Eric Nilsson. Yeah, like just puck handling. Like last year with Örebro, I thought he was more of a offensive guy, skilled, but like purely offensive, and probably a winger.
Right.
But this year, starting at the Linka and playing just throughout the year with you, Gordon, he has been a really good two-way center for me. Like he works really hard all over the ice. He throws hits. He's physical. Like he isn't very big in stature. Like he's thin, but like he's getting taller. And there's also the little twist to it. Like at least for me, when I watch a lot of younger players now, you look at the parents. How tall are they? Eric Nilsson's father, Marcus, played for Calgary Flames and for the Panthers, among others. He's 6'2". Like so, he has like growth potential still in Nilsson. And when you look at like studies that have been made of players that have become true stars in the NHL or in hockey, there are the players that have real late growth spurts. So
Right.
like if you want to take that bet too with him, like that he's going to get bigger, he's going to get taller, he is a player that's very enticing to do so with. Like there's a very big upside with him. Even if he doesn't score that much yet, he's really like evasive. He can handle the puck in all sorts of space, very low space or very big space, and he's just a really good team player too. Like just
Yeah, I mean that's kind of my read as well, right? Like I think that what you outlined is a really good example of where I believe in that sort of development curve being a possibility, like because he based on the way he plays. Like what kind of really interests me about him is if you sit back and just watch him play, you go, yeah, like this is a good player, like he's playing the right way and all these things, but like I have him in my 20s and it's like really like a top 25, 20 guy in this draft. Like, I don't know. But it's like, but you look at the way that he plays, and even if he's not successful in kind of the way that he plays a lot of the time, it's kind of like, okay, but if he just grows a little bit physically, like he looks really thin, but he plays a big guy's game now. Like he is more physical than I expected. He's more off puck intense. Like he's a dangerous defensive player. If he can just sort of gain a little bit more strength and get a little bit, filled out for what he is, then it fits so naturally with the way that he plays already, which to me is really intriguing. And I do think that there's like really good potential there. And I mean, I imagine you watched him in the Hockeyallsvenskan games that he played, but he also did not look out of place in those games, I don't think. But the only times he really did was on the physical side of things, from what I remember, right? Where it's okay, like he tried to get through a physical battle here and just got beat too easily, or he bit off a little more than he can chew along the boards and it just didn't go his way. But he's a really intriguing player, and I feel like he'll probably be one of these guys who gets drafted a little bit too late for one reason or another. Especially considering that he's playing with guys who are extremely productive this season. One of whom is Theo Stockselius. So speaking of guys who are physically underdeveloped, what's the deal with Theo Stockselius and where you see him sort of slotting in with this weird group of Swedish guys?
Yeah, he's tall but very lanky. He started the season and you see like kind of a slow player, but pretty skilled. Like you can see like how he gets points, but then during the season you see that his skating gets better and better and better. like the last game I saw of him, he was fast. Like he was skating really well. I think he's put on a little bit of weight as well, so he's not as lanky anymore. But the main thing for me is just like the smartness again with him, like positions he put himself, especially in front of the net, being able to like, and like the hand-eye coordination, just like picking down pucks with the high up with the stick. He finds the puck loose a lot along the net. So if he gets stronger and a little bit more weight to him, he's already like a 6'2.5" guy.
Mhm.
So if he gets a little bit more weight to him and being able to like hold his own in front of the net against men, I think he's going to be a really nice player to have, and it could be a decently productive player in the NHL. Like he could score goals probably just from position awareness and like hand-eye coordination and skill. Like I think he could be like one of those guys who where you want net front guy. He could be a net front guy on the power play.
Yeah. He is a very interesting development case as well, right? Like I think there's going to be a few of those. Yeah, it's an interesting pair of guys as well.
Yeah.
So I'm just thinking here. I mean, I'm sure there's also people curious about Viggo Bjork. Now, is that a guy that you want to sort of touch on, or yeah? I mean, apparently, right? Like, I don't know if that's a guy you want to touch on today, but I thought I'd bring him up because he is the league leader. He led the league in scoring, I believe, in under 20 hockey.
Or like,
yeah, by a chunk. Him and his brother, I think, were.
Yeah, you know, he had 74 points, and his brother had 67. So
he's good.
I mean, yeah, he is. I saw him first time when he was 14, I think, and then I saw him throughout the years since then. It's not been that long since he's 16, but
sure.
But yeah, he is insane playmaker. Like even early, I saw him on the power play and just in the offensive zone, like the passing ability and just like creating opportunities for others. He was really, really good at it already at 14. And then when he was 15, he scored those. They had that insane season in J18 where he scored like 98 points or whatever it was in 30 games. And yeah, he's just a really, really big talent. And one of like probably 3 Swedes for next year that is going to be talked about in the top 10 range, I would assume, with the Frölunda, my team's Ivar Stenberg is going to be up there probably in the discussions. And also I think not that talked about player, but I think he's going to be discussed a lot next year is Malte Gustafsson of HV71, who's a 6'4" defenseman who moves really well. He's going to be a player I think going to be early get in the conversation pretty early because of teams going to like him a lot, I think.
Right.
And he is very, very, very talented.
Right. Yeah. Just quickly then, like, what is it that makes him such a talented player? Because I've seen him here and there, but I'm curious of what you set him up to be, because I mean, I'm sure people are curious. But like in a nutshell, what
Malte Gustafsson, you mean? Or
no, Viggo Bjork.
Yeah. He's insanely skilled. Can pick down pucks from everywhere. Can get past players. I think his skating has been a little bit like he hasn't been the fastest player earlier in his age group, but now he's just getting better and better, faster and faster in his skating as well. Great shot, picks his corner. You can, if people saw his goal in Hockeyallsvenskan that he scored for Djurgården, it's just like doesn't even try, it looks like, and he puts in the top corner, easy peasy. And he's done that since he was 14, like just getting an opportunity off his zone, and he just buries it top corner. So he has not like a hard shot, but it's very lethal. It's very accurate. And then his playmaking, like he finds, I think I compared him to Niklas Bäckström sometime before, like just like finding open players on the power play is like the power play is a cheat code for him because he can just stand along boards and just like wait, and then little opening between a player's like leg and stick, and he just puts it precisely there, and it's just an open net for his teammate. Like he is an incredible playmaker.
Yeah. Fair enough. I mean, yeah, that makes that sounds good to me. So we'll see where he is next season. I mean,
yeah, that's gonna be interesting.
Yeah, it'll be interesting where he goes next year, because when I watch him, I don't think right away SHL guy if that's the
No.
situation. So I don't know if he goes out on loan somewhere, because I also don't think going back to J20 makes a whole lot of sense. But
I think he's going to be put in the SHL and then sink or swim, basically. I think.
Right, makes sense. I asked before the show as well. Mikael sent me a big long list of guys to talk about that he's kind of blasted through over the last little while. And the one that you mentioned that you kind of wanted to really bring up was Albin Loksanen of Vekla, who's a big boy. He's a big, beefy boy. I've seen him a couple of times. I haven't seen him enough to agree or disagree with you fully. But why Albin Loksanen? Like, if anyone here is going, who's a Swedish player that no one's talking about that I kind of like, I don't think Loksanen was Central Scouting ranked.
No, I don't think
so. So why? What's the deal with him?
I mean, I just sometimes go through like scoring on the J20 and look at players to score, and you know, like you do on Friday evenings. No, but
I mean, hey, no judgment. I do.
Yeah, and I saw him like, oh, this guy has a decent amount of points, and then you look at him and you see a 6'4", 210 pounds almost. You're like, okay, I got to see how he scores, because he has 15 goals in 32 games, I think, in J20 this year, which is pretty good. And then you see him, and he's like a fast, physical, like big guy that's good skater, gets good pace to his game, has a really, really hard shot. He's just like, he's not a top player, but he's a very intriguing one for like, if you want a big guy that can score potentially lower further down in the draft, I think he's a prime target, because I mean, you look at all the big players that get drafted from, now I'm going to sound like a salty Swede, but like you can look at the players from North America that are big and get drafted. Like, he fits the bill better than a lot of players I see get drafted usually. So I think he's a player that I think I like, but he's also a player I think would really fit what NHL teams look for.
Right. Yeah. I think I could see where you're coming from on him. Yeah. He's one that you brought up to me a while back, and I took a look at and went, oh, okay. Yeah. Like, I could see this guy just plowing his way wherever he might go, wherever that might be. So I guess before we get into sort of specific Swedish questions we've got in the chat so far, is there anywhere else? You sent me a giant list of players, but is there anywhere else you kind of wanted to go? I mean, I know out of the guys we haven't spoken about, there are guys on this list that I've really enjoyed. But I'm curious of where you might want to go before we get into specifics from the audience.
Yeah, a player I was surprised by was Loki Krantz. He's a winger for Linköping, same team as Eddie Jemborg, and I thought he was really interesting. Like, he has good pace to his game. He's skilled, like gets around defenders pretty easily. I just thought he was like a solid player. Like, if you want Eddie Jemborg and then don't get him, and then you wait 3 or 4 rounds and then you take him instead, you get a somewhat similar player. Like, but I thought he stood out when I watched Linköping players throughout all the players I watched. Or I've seen this season. I think he stands out a lot of the time, and I think he has an interesting tool set that I could see being an interesting target in the NHL draft. And then, I don't know, Linus Funk, who you and I have talked about a few times too, as a defenseman, big defenseman, solid skating. He isn't like the most impressive skater, but like, I really like his playmaking from deep, like in his own zone, like finding long stretch passes and finding ways out of the zone through pressure passes. When he gets pressured, I think he's pretty good. I think he's also a solid guy that's going to probably get drafted somewhere in the draft, because he's 6'3" and a right-handed defenseman. So.
Yeah, and he skates fine for a big guy like that. You know, he's he does the shake off a forechecker with a shimmy shake thing, which 6'3" decent skating defensemen don't always do.
No.
So he does that, and I'm sure NHL teams will like that enough. I think I've heard a little bit of talk about him being a guy that might go a little bit higher than people think. But I guess we'll see. All right, so let's pivot over to questions again. If you're not familiar, we'll do questions down the back half of the show, and if we have any time at the end, we'll just improvise and get across the finish line. So someone asks about Leo Saline Valenius and their chance of making the NHL. I know you and I watched a ton of him last year. He's been in the SHL this year.
He's been everywhere, I feel
Yeah.
like. He's been in the SHL and Hockeyallsvenskan. I think has he been with two different teams in Hockeyallsvenskan? I'm not sure. No, only one team. No, he's been in Liga as well. That's right.
Oh,
he was in Finland for a loan stint for 7 games.
Weird.
That was I remember. Yeah,
all right.
But like I wasn't the biggest fan last year. I thought he had a lot of issues that need to be ironed out, especially being picked that high.
Right.
I mean, he's solid in the games I've watched in Hockeyallsvenskan this year. I haven't seen him a ton. I haven't focused on him a lot either, so I can't really speak to a lot of his play this year. But he's a solid player. Probably going to get opportunities from the Sharks. I think he drafted him, right? We'll see.
This is an interesting one. So when you're watching shift by shift content, what do you recommend for someone new into shift by shift scouting to look out for? So yeah, you and I both spend some time in rinks, but I mean, I spend significantly more time watching video relative to being in rinks. I don't know what that difference would be for you. I know you do, obviously.
Yeah, more videos, of course.
Yeah, okay. So so being what kind of adjustments do you think there are to sort of go from one to the other, or obviously like being in the rink, it's a bit of a different experience and everything. But if someone's sort of wanting to get into this and watching some shift by shifts and everything, like what might be some things to be cognizant of?
Yeah, it's that's a really good question. Because
we'll be here for 3 more hours.
yeah, I haven't thought about it that much, but like, yeah, of course, with shift by shift, you only see that person, like a short or a certain amount of the game, whatever it is a third of the game for sometimes, or whatever, a fourth other times, depending on who you watch. Half a game if you're watching a defenseman from the OHL. But yeah, you got to be cognizant of that. What you see isn't always like it's a very it's just a spot in the game. Like you're watching a certain part of the game only, so you don't know if what they are. Like if the player you're watching like getting shut down completely and they're always in his own zone, and then you watch the full game and you see that his team is always in the offensive zone, that's a big question mark. Like why is he always there? And you can figure it out from shift by shift, but it's like there's context missing from shift by shift sometimes, but it's also really good because you can watch 5 games in a day of the same player. Like it's very useful shift by shift, but you got to be like recognize that it might not be the whole picture, but it's a lot of the picture.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing too that I've also learned is like just based on the science of cameras, that can really change an impression of a game, right? Like there have been definitely players in the past where I watch them at, let's say, at their home camera, and I come away with a certain impression, and then I watch them on a different team or playing against a different team that I know has a bit of a different camera angle. Like in the OHL, that's really common. Even in J20, that's kind of common. Like some teams, like AIK is like their camera's right at the ice, right? Like literally right there. So just by virtue of just the science behind optics, like that changes everything. And so being very aware of the angle that you're getting and how it can trick you, and getting a diversity of that sort of viewpoint, and getting a good understanding of, okay, this player playing here and this player playing here, like trying to equalize it in a way is really important. Whereas in a rink, you do kind of get a pretty good sense of just how fast the game is going, or whatever. Like
Yeah.
I think to your point about guys who might be pinned in their own end, and when they're not on the ice, the team is in the offensive zone all the time. Like I always sort of go, well, why are they pinned in their own end, right?
Yeah.
Like when you watch shift by shift, I think what's been interesting for me, like I collect data from shift by shift stuff, and the data points collect really, really fast in my work,
Yeah.
right? Like zone transitions, passes, shots, everything. It happens pretty quick. So you kind of get a lot of a sample of what's happening in a game that might be why a thing is happening, right? So it could very well be like you're watching a defenseman who's getting absolutely hammered in their own end all night, but they win the game 4-2. And you go, well, okay, like that doesn't look so good for the player. But I
Yeah.
think the shift by shift stuff does do a good job of isolating and reflecting on if that player had anything to do with why that might be, right? Like maybe their
Yeah.
partner could not make a breakout pass that night to save their life. Maybe their partner had the flu and was thrown up before the game and just tossed every puck out to center ice and just got off the ice and couldn't whatever, right? It would make you look worse, right? So
Yeah.
getting a diversity of viewings of all, and a familiarity of the types of angles you're looking at, and I think balancing an isolated viewpoint of a player as well as sort of the balance of the game as a whole, I suppose. Like
Yeah.
score effects are really important. Like teams who are winning will kind of take the foot off the gas pedal, right? So if a team's losing, how does the player sort of react in that situation? And that's kind of game dependent.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think they both have their own benefits, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And so
I
if
think you
I'm,
need both.
yeah,
Like, if
oh
you,
yeah,
if you,
yeah,
like
100%.
if you're gonna draft, like if you're a pro team, like an NHL team, you need both. Like you can't
Yeah,
just
yeah.
go
Like
by shift, and
if I
then
were
just
a if I were a boss of a team and I hired you to be my scout in Sweden, I wouldn't tell you
yeah.
to stay at home all day, right? Like
No.
that wouldn't be your job, like
No.
you'd be a spy, right? So in my mind, there is a place for all of it. But yeah, definitely shift by shift stuff. Camera trickery is real. It's a real
Yeah.
thing.
I
Um,
recommend whoever asked that, if you have the, or anyone watching this, like if you have the opportunity, go watch AIK J20,
oh my God.
and then you go watch Brynäs J20, and
Yeah.
then you see the difference, because AIK is just like
Yeah.
you're on the ice
Yeah.
basically, and then Brynäs you have a bird's view
You're in the
from,
gondola.
yeah, you're looking from like the Empire State Building,
Yeah,
like the
it's a
view.
satellite.
Yeah, you're like from, you can barely see the numbers from that one.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's a really, and I think the difference also, like, is the pace when you watch on video compared to in person. Because I realized this when I watched younger players, like when I watched like 14, 15-year-olds, you watch the game on video, you think it's pretty slow. You're like,
Yeah.
what is this skating really like? If, especially when you like jump between a lot, that I do, like you go from watching Hockeyallsvenskan to
Yeah.
watching under 16 to U15 and stuff like that, that you always, like, your mind, you need to have a like a little signal you turn, so you can
Yeah.
like set it to U15, and then but when you're in the rink and watching U15 or U16, it goes fast still.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
it's much better, like a much better way to see like the skating ability, and just like the little quirks everyone has with their skating and like stuff like that. I think it's harder to see, especially depending on the camera. And as we discussed, like if you have a bird's view or close
Yeah.
view, like it's hard to see the skating technique and stuff like that if it really works.
Yeah, it's definitely something to be careful of. Like that's I think the biggest thing by far is how it can sort of trick you and camera angles and all that stuff. So I guess that's kind of the point. Like it can be tricky, and sometimes you learn by making mistakes of going, I really, really love this kid. And like for me now, I kind of go, okay, I need to make sure that I diversify my viewings of this guy as much as I can. Because sometimes I'll go, oh, right. Like zooming out a little bit, you get a better sense of like, I guess what I like about a camera angle like Brynäs is you get way more of a picture of the game itself, and you can see more guys at once and where they're at and how they're moving around. Whereas in like AIK, you're like, oh, there goes that guy zooming by. That was kind of fun.
Yeah.
It's just a different ball game kind of. So someone asked about Jakubis, Wozniak, and Milton Yastrin looking like decent center prospects. Who do you think drives 3-zone play that I like to see? I think you would be similar. And who do you think is is more likely to at least make the NHL? I would say Yastrin personally, but Yves Wozniak, I think, has played his best hockey when I've seen him at center. But I'm curious of your thoughts on that, on those two guys as potential center prospects.
Yeah, I think both are wingers, probably.
At the end of the day, probably you're right. Probably. Yeah.
I think Yves Wozniak, when he was younger, when I saw him when he was 15, I thought he was a really good two-way player. I haven't seen that as much when he's grown into like a more scoring role in J20 and with Luleå. And as you said, Yves Wozniak has really stepped up his game throughout the season. He started really slow.
Yeah.
And you were questioning, like, is this guy even like a guy you can rank and have on a list?
Yeah.
But like, I think he's proven that he is a talented hockey player. I think the question is hard because who's most likely to reach the NHL, I think, is very much like different from what you and I think, and also what the NHL team thinks. Because I think Yves Wozniak is going to be more liked by NHL teams than. I mean, it's very even between those two. I think it's you flip a coin basically because they are both. They're both different. Pretty. Yeah, they're different, but like
they're different.
They're very similar level, I think.
Yeah,
I think Yastrin is a little bit more talented, but like Yves Wozniak has a shot. He has like the work rate and stuff like that. Yastrin has the really good skating and ability, and it's a tough question because
like I find that Yastrin is flashier. Like I when I watch him, it's more like a higher percentage of the time I'm like, what is he doing? Like, I don't really know. He doesn't really have much of an impact on the game, but then he turns it on and you're like, holy crap, look at him go.
Yeah.
Whereas Yves Wozniak is kind of like the opposite of that, where it's like, I don't really like you're noticing him a lot on the ice. Like, he's putting himself in good positions. He's physically there and getting some scoring chances and grinding along the board, setting chances up. But you don't see that, like, I'm going to give me the puck in my own end and I'm going to go for it and just gun through everybody and set up a play in the offensive zone in one play, right? Like, Yastrin does that. So it's like, which one do you value more? And I don't know. Like, I feel like you're right. Like, Yves Wozniak is probably more likely to be some kind of NHL player, but I'm not totally sold on Yastrin not being that either.
No. I think NHL teams both like them.
A
lot. Yeah. So I think it's. I think they're very equal. Let's say. I think I like Yastrin a little bit better just because, as you say, he can take over a game. I don't think Yves Wozniak has that ability, but Yves Wozniak has like that like, if he gets close, it's a close game and he gets the puck in the opposite zone, he can score from like the outside, and he's always gonna, like, he has a really good work rate and like the motor is pretty good, so he can always like keep a high pace throughout the game, while Yastrin is a little bit more in and out. So I think like it's a tough one, but they're both talented players.
If you're what do you see? Do you see a bit of Zach Benson and Victor Eklund, and who would you rather have? So I don't know if you remember much of Zach Benson, if you watched a ton of him before your Frölunda days.
I saw him a little bit, but like I think Eklund is more talented from what I remember.
Think so too. Like
Zach Benson is just like a bit more two-way player, like being a little bit everywhere, while Eklund is just like this high-end skating creative guy. I think Eklund's a better talent.
I think Eklund's a little bit better. I think they're comparable and like similar-ish, but I think I would go with Eklund first. David Sod is here. What's going on? How high do you rate the undersized forwards that have gotten into pro games this year, like Nordlund, Sverchek, Klingsell, and Sundqvist? So we've talked about Sundqvist and how much we like him. Sverchek we also talked about, but the two Skellefteå guys, Klingsell and Nordlund, came into the season, especially Klingsell, with a bit of fanfare. I really loved him at the Holinka tournament, but those two to me have been a little bit underwhelming over the course of this season. I liked Nordlund when I saw him in the SHL. I thought he looked okay there, but I still doubt their NHL upside. But in that group of four, like, How do you see those guys and where they might slot into the draft?
This might be a little bit of a unpopular opinion, but I think Nordlund has a really like the highest offensive ceiling of all of those four.
I don't think that's a hot take. Yeah.
No, but like Nordlund, Klingsell, Sverchek, and who else was it?
Sundqvist.
Sundqvist, yeah. I think Nordlund has a really high offensive ceiling because I think he's super creative in the offensive zone.
And his skill is ridiculous. Like his skill was crazy.
Yeah, but I think the size is all like he's 5'9", I think.
Yeah,
and that's going to be a little bit of an issue. But like he works really hard. Like he was almost always with Eklund the most talented 06 throughout the years, even at younger age. But I think I think Nordlund has a really high ceiling, but he has also a rough time. Like he has a longer way to the NHL. Let's say like that.
Yeah.
I think Klingsell is skilled, but depending on what game you watch of him, you either go like, is this guy a draft eligible? Like, is he supposed to go in the draft? And then you watch another game, and you're like, holy shit, what is this? Like, he can really be on and off, but he's a really really skilled player. But yeah, he's much more dependent on his environment compared to others. Yeah. Those other four.
Yeah,
Sverchek is such a like hard worker, constantly going. Like he gets on the ice and he's full speed all the time. I think he could learn from maybe shifting gears.
Yeah,
not being like
100%.
It's not a bad thing being in the highest gear every time, like fifth gear all the time. But he learns how to shift gears and use his speed when it's more, when there's an opportunity to score more. And I think he's also just like not getting into the scoring areas as much as I want him to, which is why I'm a little bit lower on him maybe than you, Tony, or Sam. But I still think he's like a borderline first round player to me still.
Someone just said, "What's up with Linus Eriksson?" I honestly can't answer that, but you probably have seen him quite a bit this year. So obviously the points haven't quite been there for him. But what's the deal with him? Because you and I both really liked him last year.
It's been a tough season for him. When he was with Djurgården, he had a pretty big role coming into the season. He was going to be one of the centers playing consistently, I think, and then he got injured just at the start of the season. And Djurgården have like 16 forwards or something. Like they have a lot of forwards.
Yeah.
And then you also have players from the J20 team trying to get into the team. So it's been a tough situation for him there. I don't think he's been that bad when I watched him. When I've seen him like at games where I've been at, I think he's been pretty good. I think moving to a new team is always hard in the middle of the season, with a weird like breakup or whatever you want to call it with Djurgården as it was. So I think it's a little bit of like a wash season. Like I'm not going to put too much stock into it.
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. I think the player's still there, but I think we need to monitor what he does next year with Timrå.
Yeah, I think the guy that I always think about when I think about Eriksson, obviously not comparing them directly, but I want to check because I feel like Oscar Fisker Molgaard was a guy who, after he was drafted, had a bit of a quiet sort of season where he didn't. Maybe I'm wrong. Oh no, he had a pretty good year the year after he was drafted in the SHL. Maybe I'm thinking of someone else, but I just feel like with Eriksson, it's kind of like Hillstrom, where when you watched him last year, you saw how smart he was, you know, how good he was up and down the ice. Maybe not the most sort of offensively impactful guy up the middle of the ice, but it almost didn't matter because he just moved the play in the right direction so well. And oftentimes guys like that aren't rewarded on the score sheet. So, and it's always worth betting on, right? Like he plays the style of play where it's not like he just forgets how to play hockey, right? No. Like I don't know what might have happened there, but I do think that he's the type of player where with good leadership around him and like good guidance, he should figure it out, right? Like there's just too much, I think, that's working in his favor and things that I think are hard to teach players.
Yeah, I think it's just been a tough situation this season. I think, it's just been hard for the 18-year-old to go to like be pushed away a little bit, like with Djurgården, like not performing as well as he hoped to, and injury the issues and stuff like that. Yeah. So I think there's a lot of explanations to why it's been the way it's been.
Someone asked about Ivar Stenberg in the SHL. He is there. He is a good player. That's all I really know.
Yeah, I mean, he hasn't scored a ton if you look at it, but he is a really, really good neutral zone player. Like, he gets the puck and he carries it into the offensive zone consistently. Great skating. Needs to put on some weight, but like, yeah, I think he plays well almost every game I see of him in the SHL. And I think he's a really good transition player right now, and I think he's going to be a very good scoring player next season in his draft year.
Yeah,
like if you look at like, he's very similar to, like, if you look at Victor Eklund, if you look at William Eklund, and maybe not Leo Carlson because he scored a little bit more in his D-1 year, but all these players that are late birthdays in their age group, but they have but early in pro hockey they don't score a lot their first year in hockey, and then they adjust and get stronger and better, and then they get a little bit bigger role next year potentially. I don't know what's up there, but then then they explode, and I think Ivar Stenberg is a prime candidate for that.
Mm-hmm. Someone mentions that Luca Cagnoni's making his NHL debut. Good for him. Way to go. Who are some Swedish Oh no, sorry, I skipped one. Which Swedish prospect is the most natural center, and which one is the most undervalued? You'll probably say Frölunda, right?
I mean, no. This was the question I mentioned when we talked about Hillström, where the most natural center. Yeah, I think Hillström is the most natural center. But I think Frölunda has a really good pipeline to be an NHL center. I think he has the ability to be that. But I think Hillström is probably the most natural at center.
Probably the answer to both of those questions: most undervalued and then most natural center. You know, like I might throw Nilsson in there, but I don't know. As opposed to other than those guys, I don't even know who else I'd even put in the conversation.
No, I don't, there's.
Like the next Swedish guy where I look at him and I go, that guy's always going to be a center is Koblar, but I don't see Koblar at all on the level of Nilsson and Hillström. No. But Koblar, I love him. Yeah, I love that guy.
Yeah.
Anyway, how are the Swedish prospects for 2026 looking? They look very good so far. I mean, I would agree. I don't know how much you can get into on that, but I would say they're good.
Yeah, it's a good group. I watched, I don't know, hundreds of players in that 2008 age group, so I'm pretty familiar with it. But yeah, it's a very talented group. I didn't think it was going to be this good when I saw them when they were 14, 15, but they really developed and become a really strong class as well. You have the three at the top that I mentioned with, or two at the top, or three at next year with Stenberg, Viggo Bjork, and Malte Gustafsson. But there's other late birthday players that I like William Håkansson in Luleå is pretty good, like a good, big, strong defenseman.
I like him.
You have another guy in Luleå, Kasper Justovara Karlsson, but he's very, very small, but he's very, very fun.
He's fun.
There's a lot of players next year that is going to be, like Elton Hermansson is very talented. Who else are 2008s that have done?
I'm just pulling up my list here. Brungo Larson. I like Brungo Larson.
He's good.
Lagerberg, the next Lagerberg.
Oh yeah, scores 20 goals and
27 goals and 3 assists this year.
Yeah,
elite. Who else is on here? Drevechki. I'd say Drevechki is on.
Oh yeah, he's very good.
He's not Swedish, so whatever.
But he's in Sweden. Yeah.
Yeah. I also I have Tim Tusen written down. Tim Tusen in Luleå with Hawkinson and those guys.
Yeah, Marcus Normark, we need to mention. He's probably
Normark.
Be a first round candidate. He's been really good with you, Gordon, in J20.
Yeah.
Nils Bartelsson, Norwegian player Niklas Aram Olsen, also really good in J20 this year. Very talented hockey player. Played under 18s for Norway last year, World under 18s. So
yeah, pretty wild. Okay, Brian Stewart's here. That's too bad. How would you rate these Swedish defensemen? Malte Voss, Carl Onborn, Zeb Lindgren, Rocky Langvart, Linus Funk, all of them basically. Aron Dahlqvist and Teddy Hallqvist. So we kind of have gone over Voss and Onborn and Funk already. I mean, it's a pretty decent list of guys. I don't know how you want to tackle this, but
hello, Brian.
Yeah,
nice to see you. I think I like Maltevas best out of these players. Seb Lindgren is a candidate of to be the top guy there, but I think Maltevas is just a very, very good player already at J20 level. I think his passing is pretty good. Like, he gets out of the zone easily. He's strong defensively, physical, solid skating. I think he has much more to I think he has a room to develop in his skating as well.
Agreed.
He's taken a big step on the puck this season as well.
Yep.
So I think he's number one for me. I think Funk, Amborn, Lindgren are probably in a tier just below there.
Yeah.
I think Dahlqvist could probably challenge for that tier. So yeah, Amborn, Funk, Lindgren, Dahlqvist, Vass are probably all in the same tier. But then you're just like whatever you like the most out of those guys. Then you have Rocky, who's a very likable player, but he's a little bit undersized. Yeah, he's a little bit undersized.
Yeah.
And skating is solid, but maybe not good enough for a guy his size at this moment. But it's a very, very likable player, like physical, and he can create in the offensive zone as well. So
yeah.
But yeah. And Theo Holmqvist, I liked more when I saw him this time around than earlier in the season.
Right. What do you think of Mikael Eriksson? He's produced well the past couple of months, and he's young. What round do you see him getting drafted? I don't know if I would pick him, but he has been more productive recently. But I don't know. I'm curious of what you think of him, because you've seen him for a long time.
Yeah.
You've been really on Mikael Eriksson's train for a while. But
yeah, I've seen him since he was 14. So like a lot of these guys, I guess. But I think he struggled with his skating when he moved to Sweden initially. The first time when he moved to Örebro, became a lot better there. Moved back to Norway, played some men's game, and I think with this season in Färjestad, he's grown a little bit. His skating has improved a lot. I think his problem with him is he's a primary, like his points is primary on the power play. Like a lot of his points are on the power play. But I think he has a lot of skill. Like, he's very good on the puck. He's a very good playmaker, decent shot. But I'm just not sure if it's going to work out in the NHL long term. But he's also very young for this draft. Like, he's almost next year, I think. He's a 12th of September birthday, I think. So I think he's worth a shot. But I'm not sure like how high. I think he's probably in the lower rounds. But I think he's worth a shot and see what he can develop into, because I think he's played a certain type of hockey in Norway where he's been like the superstar for a very long time, and then it comes to Sweden and he needs to adapt to being a little bit more of one of plenty, like with his talent.
Yeah.
So I think there's some development there where he can become like a later development path to him compared to other players that have played in Sweden for their entire life, basically.
Right. We kind of covered Stenberg and Bjork already. I mean, how would you say that Stenberg and Bjork compare to guys like Frölunda and Eklund this year? I think I would definitely have Stenberg. I kind of think Stenberg's the best of them all.
Yeah.
Bjork I'm not as familiar with, so I'll stay out of that one, but I'm curious of what you think.
I think, as crazy as it sounds, I think the upside of Stenberg and Bjork are probably higher than both Eklund and Frölunda. Like, it depends. It's so hard when you're D-1 and try to hype up players like this when it's not their draft year and they need to perform during a year where there's a lot more pressure and all that stuff. But I think the talent level of Stenberg and Bjork is very, very high, and I think they should be able to challenge Gavin McKenna, which is crazy, maybe the Canadians, but like they are that talented. They are very, very talented, and it is special to see like a play. Like, even when you watch Viggo Bjork, as you said, like it's sometimes hard to see. Like, okay, is it special? But then you see the score sheet and he's had 5 points in the game and whatever. Like,
Yeah.
he had a stretch, I think, before Christmas where he scored like 35 points in 10 games, like at J20 level as a 16-year-old, which is bizarre.
Yeah.
Like it is truly bizarre. So I think there's yeah. So I think there's an upside to them that is higher than both Eklund and Frondell. But yeah, we'll see next year. That's what we gotta say. Like it's really hard. You should never hype up a draft class before it's But like there's a lot of good players next year. Like even I watched some WHL 2008s to help Joel Henderson back in the day too, and to give my opinions on them, and they're also very, very talented. So it's looking like a good draft class. We'll see if it is.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see how we feel in October or November. Okay. This is a good question. Sweden might be the best at producing NHL players per capita, but it doesn't seem to pan out as much when it comes to high-end offensive forwards. Why do you think that is, and are there any solutions in mind? So I just looked. In the top 30 of NHL scorers, the only Swedes there are Jesper Bratt, William Nylander, and Lucas Raymond. That's I mean, when you look at other nationalities that aren't Canadian or American, like there's 2 Germans, a Swede, or a Finn, and 2 Russians. 3 Russians. So it's not like Sweden's like way behind in that regard. But I kind of see where that question is coming from, because when you think like biggest stars in the National Hockey League, like not a whole lot of Swedish players really jump to mind these days, like it kind of did when we were kids, right? So what, and I do think that is kind of the issue, is that like that flash and razzle dazzle pure offense level, like the William Nylanders of the world, there aren't many of them in the world, right? In Sweden. So I wonder if you would see if there's anything to dig into there, or if you just think it's just a coincidence.
It's probably a coincidence, but there's something to it, because it looked like Elias Pettersson hasn't had a great season, but he looked like he was tracking towards becoming one of those premier star players in the NHL. He had a 100-point season and stuff like that, but it's hard to say why it is that we don't have the true star quality players, because I'm not sure what it is in our development that makes it that way. But I think it's a very hard thing to point out. Like, to be honest, I don't know if if like there's a scale where you like how much you're gonna put into like the keeping players playing as long as possible that we talked about earlier in the show, and creating star players. Like if you try to put too much in this, like in the keeping player, like having the depth, then the star player might not be as easy to come by. So
I think my thought on this is, from watching so much Swedish hockey over the years and everything, I think Sweden is better at producing just like great players, right? Like I think that what allows you to produce in the NHL, and what allows North American players to maybe be those really productive NHLers, is that there's a bit more like confidence and like willingness to try something very, very, very creative and a little risky in order to generate like a really, really good creative scoring chance. Whereas I think a lot of Swedes, like I think about like, there's obviously like Victor Hedman and Rasmus Dahlin on the back end, right? But you don't see Rasmus Dahlin really playing like Cale Makar all that much, like, but he's still like, you watch Rasmus Dahlin play and you go, he's just a great player. Like, and I think there are a lot of those coming from Sweden. Lucas Raymond is another really good example. I think Jesper Bratt has kind of turned out to be like that. Adrian Kempe might be the closest thing to what I see a Canadian elite offensive player being like, where it's like, the screw you, I'm going to blow the puck through you and then put it through your legs or put it behind me and try to find a way to whatever. Like, I think there's a little bit more of that. And I'm not saying like in Sweden culturally, it's like coached out of your game, but I feel like it's just something, there's more of a focus on process and like procedure. Like I see a lot more Swedish breakouts where instead of dumping and chasing, it's a lot of D-to-D work, opening up the ice more east-west and laterally, and sort of more tactically trying to like take apart the opponent. Whereas here it's more just like north, dump and chase, go to the net, get the puck to the net, do the whatever. And that might be a bit of a difference that might limit it, but it doesn't mean that I don't think Sweden's creating great players, because I think they are. It's just, I think it's just a different version of what good is. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, maybe that's kind of it, but I also think that it is maybe something that isn't the biggest issue in the world, right? Like I think of Swedish players, or at least players who came from there, or did Nick Ehlers? I don't think he did. He was in
he
went to
WHL.
WHL, something like that. But like you got Philip Forsberg in there, obviously Lucas Raymond, Adrian Kempe, the defenseman obviously that everybody loves, William Eklund, Erik Karlsson, like they exist. But
we haven't had like a true top, like the latest discussion we had of like a Swedish player being the best player in the world is probably Erik Karlsson in 2017. Like that playoff, run was like he's maybe the best player in the league, or in the world. But other than that, we haven't really had like, you could have argued maybe Hedman at his true peak, but he was the best defenseman, period. But there was Connor McDavid and stuff like Leon Draisaitl during that time too. So
and watching and I think watching the Four Nations face-off, you do see that like Sweden still is a extremely strong group of NHL players, right? Like you put all those guys together, they're a great team. And so, and when I watch them at that tournament, I go, like these guys are all just great. Like they might not have like the razzle dazzle star power flash that like a Canadian group might have here and there, or the Americans or something, but you can't really take anything away from how Swedes play the game. I also feel like in Sweden, especially at the professional level, you don't see so many games going like 5-0 and someone has a hat trick. Like, I don't know how many hat tricks you see in the SHL in a given season. It's just not really part of the game there, right? Like there's a lot more 2-1, 3-2, 4-2 games. And I think a lot of that comes down to just how fast they play and how it can be much more back and forth.
That's why like a guy like Viggo Björk is such an anomaly in Sweden, where you like, he's a D-1 that scores 75 points almost. Like it's unheard of. Like it's never happened before. Like I think East Wozniak was had the best like D-1 season of all time last year, and he had like 50 something points. 15. Oh no, Elias Anderson had the best D-1 with 59 points, but like but it's still 15 point difference for bigger. Like it is very unheard of, and it's hard to put in like in context when you look at him that way with the points. And I think that's I think also hockey in Sweden is much more of a team sport. Like it's not as individualistic as Canadian hockey. Like when I look at Swedish youth hockey or U16 hockey, and then when I watched players for like our friend Jordan, when he sent like guys from the OHL and look at and helping Joel with looking at players in the WHL, it's a different game, because these players are much more like, these players have the puck 75% of the time when they are on the ice, while in Sweden you have the puck maybe 48% or whatever. Like it's a big difference, where it's a much more of a team game. You have to be able to play a team game in Sweden if you want to make it. And I think it's a bit different with that in Canada. Or US.
And also, for Viggo Björk, it also helps that junior team is just a wagon.
For sure.
There's a lot of really good players on that team who can definitely push things in the right direction. We kind of talked a bit about Theo Stakselius already earlier in the show. Someone, we're a little bit late to the party, but someone asked about getting you to talk as much as you can about David Edstrom. I'll give you the credit on Edstrom. You told me to take a look at him. Well, I was on a plane. I remember I was on a plane somewhere watching David Edstrom, and I went, "Oh my God, maybe this Mikael guy isn't so dumb after all." He's just. But again, I think it's another one of those guys from Sweden where you just watch him play for Edstrom, and you're just like, he just is good. Like, he's a guy that makes everyone else kind of better. He's a guy who plays well enough defensively. He does everything you want him to do as a center, and he's good at it. And he doesn't try to bite off more than he can chew, and that's valuable. Is he going to be an 80-point NHL, 70-point NHL center? No. But like a good middle six, really good third line, checking line center who moves the puck well, And so I think that's kind of the type of player that I think Sweden really kind of excels at, is those selfless, play driving, solid hockey players.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Someone asked about why Mikael Bronsig-Nygård isn't scoring. I don't have a good answer for that. I mean, I don't think his game translates particularly amazingly offensively in the first place, but he has been a little bit underwhelming, I suppose, at this level. But
I mean, he scored like 8 goals in 40-something games last year.
Right.
You can't really expect him to score more than that in the SHL, really.
Yeah.
Like, we all know he has a good shot, but it was... and he was picked where he probably should have been picked, so like that's not a problem at all. But he isn't gonna be that big offensive guy for Detroit, but he's gonna be able to score goals. So but it takes time. It takes time to develop, and it's hard to play in the SHL.
Considering the difference from juniors and the variance in difficulty with getting SHL opportunities, what attributes are not obvious in Sweden that you think are more valuable for NHL projection? That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that.
Not obvious. I mean, we talked about a very abstract, like smart, like how smart hockey IQ. Like a lot of people want to talk about it, but not a lot of people like can explain what it is.
Right.
I'm not sure if I can like completely. Like I know what I look for in a smart hockey player, but it's always just like is a very abstract thing. But I think smart is the thing that is going to take you the furthest, and it's the thing that's going to be what NHL teams look for the most, outside of like physicality and like when I watch a hockey game and watch a new player, the first thing I see is skating. Okay, how good is skater is this guy? And then you go down by the checklist. But smart is the one that takes the longest time to figure out, like, because it takes time to see how smart of a player is. And I think from going into the SHL from junior, it's you got to be a smart hockey player. That is like the number one thing. And then there's other things that you also have to be able to skate and all that stuff. But I think smart is the thing that really projects into the NHL the most.
Who do you like? We talked about these guys all the time, but we love them. Who do you like more, Mikael Sverchek or Hillstrom? I mean, I like Sverchek a little bit more, but they're in the same tier for me. Yeah. I mean, you could interchange them for varying reasons. I know you would like Hillstrom more, but I mean, I see the appeal of a guy like Hillstrom and a more projectable style of play out of him than I think I see out of Sverchek. But also, I think Sverchek very easily could be very easily projectable just by being an energetic sort of checking guy who does have some offensive tools. But I think the big hurdle for him, whereas I don't think it's a hurdle for Hillstrom, but with Sverchek, I think the big hurdle, like you said, is that being able to be dynamic and change the flow of the game and slow things down a little bit, and not just be get up the ice, make a play, get up the ice, make a play. Like, it's more get up the ice, take a look, see what's around. Whereas Hillstrom is very much more of like an off the puck, one touch pass type guy who moves the puck really, really well, and can also, I think he does have the ability to sort of slow things down a little bit and survey the ice a little bit more. But I just feel like maybe Sverchek is a little bit more like pure skill, pure speed, pace, physicality, but maybe not as well refined intelligence wise. So I can see why you might go one way or the other, honestly.
Yeah.
Eklund or Frölunda, and why we kind of went over that earlier. But in short, Eklund for both of us.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you think Mattias Havelid will make the transition to North America? I don't know about the NHL, but I think he'll play in the AHL or something, and you know, you'll see what he can do there. He's fine.
Yeah, he's a very smart passing player. Like, he can handle pressure pretty well. His skating needs to improve a little bit. He is also not the strongest or biggest guy. So
no,
There's always going to be a question mark, but I think moving him to the AHL, I think he's going to do well there, and then we'll see if he can translate to the NHL.
I think you and I both said when he was a draft eligible, we're like, I could see this guy being a huge name in the SHL, right? Like maybe not an NHL player, but like definitely good in Europe, bigger ice, little bit more speed and skill focused. Definitely could see that working there.
I think he's on loan at Djurgården right now, and has been for a while, and he's been doing pretty well in Hockeyallsvenskan. So it's been good to play regularly rather than being a seventh defenseman or in the stands for Linköping.
Thoughts about the Ostberg twins? I don't really see a ton there with them. I don't know if you've seen much of them there, but I don't have much to say on them.
No, me neither. They're good players. I don't think they're NHL players.
Yeah. Someone asked about Melvin Fernstrom, recently traded. Or no, was he traded?
He was in the Vancouver to Pittsburgh. Yeah,
right, Pittsburgh. Right.
Yeah, he's been really, really good lately. He's been. I need to check how much he scored, but like he's been doing really well and been like a player to rely on for Örebro in the SHL. So he has had a good year, especially the last few months of the season. He didn't score a lot throughout the last few weeks of the season, but like he had a stretch there where he scored like 2 points in 2 goals in a 3-1 win, 2 goal and assist in a 2-1 win, whatever. Like he's been for Örebro that really struggled this year and also really needed those goals to not be dragged into the relegation battle. So he's done really well this year, I think. Yeah.
I don't think you can talk much about the guys in the 2010s and everything, just because of your work. The last question for the day, and then we got to get out of here. Someone asked about Max Westergaard, about his SHL time. So I don't know what you can cover about Westergaard, but I've seen him a little bit as well. I don't know if you want to give a quick spiel about him at all, but then after that we can get out of here.
Yeah, I mean, he plays for the team I work for, so it's but I like his pace of game. He's really fast. He is creative in the offensive zone, finds pretty good passing lanes in the offensive zone, and he can score. Obviously, he scored like second most, I think, of the draft eligible prospects in J20. But he's a good player. He's a bit small, but he's grown throughout the year. I think he is. I think he's going to get drafted at least, and he's also young for this draft as well. Like I think he's an August birthday or something like that.
Right.
So yeah, I think he's an interesting guy, but I'm not sure what the upside is for like NHL wise. He's a really good player for us in Frölunda at least.
Yeah, fair enough.
And we like him a lot.
Yeah. All right. Well, that I think is going to be it. I got to get on the road. I'm going to the woods for the weekend, and so there will not be a show Monday night. So we'll come back to you maybe Tuesday night, but if not, Thursday afternoon next week. We're going to have a good time, obviously, then. But Mikael of Frölunda Hockey Club, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was really nice talking to you. Do you have any closing thoughts, things to, shout out before you go, or are we just getting the heck out of here and letting you get back to whatever it is you're doing?
Yeah, no, not a lot of closing thoughts, not a lot of things to plug.
Nice.
I'm just hoping Frölunda can win the SHL. That's all I'm wishing
Fingers
for.
crossed.
When the playoffs starting tonight or tomorrow for Frölunda's part, but yeah.
Nice. Well, yeah, I'm with you. Fingers crossed. I mean, selfishly, I'm a little more of a Brunus guy right now because of the kids, but just for you, let's go Frölunda, do the thing. So thank you very much, and we'll talk to you soon. All right.
Yeah, that's it.
That's it.